the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9.
There we go. Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 349. Can women tell the Motte from the Bailey? I am your host, Hannah Wallen, and I am here with Lauren Brooks. We do not have a mic tonight, as he is unavailable, but we still have that blind spot to talk about. This one's a little bit different. So one of the things that I've noticed when debating some of the things that the United States have been spending money on, with other people on social media and in person, is this habit of the Motte Bailey attack, where they look for an easy to defend good reason why this spending is legit and it's not wrong and so on. And they'll defend that, and they'll try to avoid discussing the actual outcome of the spending. So before I do anything else, I gotta make sure it's showing the window I want it to show, which is this image here. And the reason that I want you to see this, I know a lot of people already know the Motte Bailey fallacy, but just to go over it again, just because, we always get new listeners, and sometimes we also, people will forget, like, what we've talked about before, and some of this stuff is just, if you're not thinking about it every day, the terms kind of disappear from your head a little bit. So a Motte Bailey attack, or a Motte Bailey argument, the description is modeled after this medieval design for communities, where they used to have the highly defensible castle or fortress, and then it would open up to or connect to this less easily defended village. And you could have a lot more people living comfortably spread out in the village. They got their own houses, they got their businesses and so on. But if the community is under attack, then everybody wants to retreat to the fortress, because that Bailey is, the Bailey's going to get burned. So the Motte Bailey attack, this example is probably going to be controversial for some people just because it's about abortion, and I know the men's rights movement's divided on abortion, but I think there's a very good way to explain this. The first argument here in the easy to defend Motte is, pregnancy can put a woman's life in danger, abortion can save lives. I think more people can agree with that statement. Well, that's true. Okay. Sometimes abortion is medically necessary because the woman is going to die if she doesn't have the abortion, right? And you'll get a larger number of people who will accept that as a valid pro-abortion argument, that, in those circumstances it needs to be legal, right? Than you will with abortion for any reason at any time. There will be some people that will be like, well, wait a minute now, we don't agree with that, right? So it's harder to defend abortion for any reason at any time than it is to defend sometimes abortion is medically necessary because pregnancy can put a woman's life in danger. And usually, the argument then goes back and forth between, actually, the reasons that can happen are rare, and a lot of them are preventable, and so on. So you have this back and forth even with the defensible argument.
See, I come at it from a little bit of a different angle.
Yeah.
I take the point of, yes, pregnancy can be dangerous. You need to be aware of the dangers of it, and
Before you
if
get
you
pregnant.
exactly,
Yeah.
right? And if you choose it, you go into it knowing willingly that this is something that could happen. And
Yeah.
I still don't agree that it's, listen, it's definitely a gray area, you know.
Yeah. I think
However,
most pro-life activists, when they look at this argument, they will settle on a very specific litmus.
mm,
Is the question the baby lives or the mom lives, or is the question the mom and the baby die, or just the baby dies?
mhm,
Because if it's the latter, most people are going to be like, well, we're going to prevent one death at least,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
which is where I stand on it. Because
yeah,
in most circumstances, the overwhelming majority of circumstances, in fact, it's incredibly rare anymore where you're choosing between the life of the mother and the life of the baby at this point.
right. Mhm.
Because we are able to deliver prematurely, effectively, so well, and in so many cases, it's almost a moot point to argue mom or baby. And so that's kind of my thinking on it. But I know there are people that would argue that, and yeah. I know my situation when I was in labor with my son, and they had made one cut for the C-section, and he was such a little chunk that they couldn't get him out. Like, they were pushing on my
Oh,
belly, and they had a hold of, the way they get a hold of the baby is they put their hands under the baby's shoulders, and the thumbs go over the shoulders, and they're not pulling on the head because, obviously that could be very dangerous and damaging. And they're
yeah.
trying to gently wrestle him out of there. And they tried like 3 times, and then they're like, all right, guys, this is our last chance. And they didn't say to get him out without making another cut. So
Ugh.
my half panicked mind heard, my baby's going to die. And I
Yeah.
tried to talk, and I threw up all over everything because I was going to be like, no, this is not your last fucking chance. Cut my legs off if you have to. Get him out alive. You can't do that. That's my baby. And I think most women have that,
Yeah.
sense of it's your baby. But there are those circumstances where, and then there's also a circumstance that a lot of pro-lifers don't like to acknowledge, and it's also an incredibly rare circumstance where the pregnancy fails and miscarries, but doesn't expel the dead fetus. The body
Mm,
doesn't expel the dead fetus, and they have to go in and get it.
yeah.
And that's considered an abortion also. And it's
Really?
really tricky that pro-abortion advocates will use that argument as a pro-abortion argument. And I'm like, look, if that's the situation, yes, of course you don't let a woman die because there's a dead baby rotting inside of her. Okay?
Yeah.
But that doesn't justify killing a live baby, does it?
No,
And
definitely
so
not.
people are tricky with these and when it comes to abortion, it's really stark and easy to see. People get really tricky with that, right? Um, at the other end of it, you have people who, we can argue, most people can agree that the scientific criteria for life shouldn't be different for a circumstance because we want an outcome. It's the same, for this every circumstance. It's got to be standard, or we start going down a pathway of making unethical choices, right? And the legal standard for murder and homicide shouldn't change just because we feel bad about the circumstances that an individual has. Like, it's not an insurmountable circumstance. We just feel bad about it.
Yeah.
And so, we have those arguments. Those are fair arguments, and those are a good Motte But then you also have some people, and it's much more rare in the pro-life movement, that will argue that if a person is fertile, if a woman is fertile, a girl is fertile, that means her body's ready to handle pregnancy. And there are times when children have been molested and gotten pregnant. And being able to conceive doesn't necessarily mean that a child's body is going to carry a baby and the baby's going to live and the child's going to live and everything's going to be medically okay, even though it's not morally okay. And so it becomes a touchy subject arguing that circumstance. And that's really not a good response to when they use child molestation as a pro-abortion argument. But I've heard that response to that argument. So there's a lot there that, these Motte Baileys are pretty blatant and obvious, and you can detect them, and you can sort of fight them and everything. But there are times when it becomes muddied, subtle, cloudy, and I feel like the stuff that we've been talking about, it sort of falls into that category, right? How can you possibly be against feeding the hungry? Well, we didn't say we were against feeding the hungry. We said we were against giving women a monopoly on access, so that if it's men who are hungry, they have to do what women say or starve. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's what we're going to get into today. But before we get into that, we do have to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. So, I wonder, Jen Bottle has kind of pointed out inadvertently another Motte Bailey argument. It's not exactly a Motte Bailey argument, it's kind of a misdirection argument that people use, right? He says, my grandmother died giving birth to my mother. It was an actual choice. Mother or baby and my mother's relatives took the Catholic solution of the time, 1923. Okay, so what I will point out is we've had 100 years of medical advancements since then. And the things that caused that choice, the scope and spectrum of things that caused that choice to happen, to be necessary, has dramatically shrunk over that point in time, shrunk over that amount of time. Like, to the degree that it almost never happens that the choice is mother versus baby. The choice is almost always mother and baby, or just baby. And it's a heartbreaking choice, but, just not the same as either or. There's no reason to let the mother die unless you have this weird fatalist, well, if you're going to die, God meant you to die, which I've actually heard that argument too, and I think it's bullshit. But we'll get into the thing we're going to get into today, and I'm going to introduce this by pointing out, yes, this is an old story. Right? This story itself, we're all familiar with it. We've done a couple of episodes on it. We mentioned this at the very beginning of our episode on proxy violence, which is ancient honey badger history. right? It was I can't remember whether it was before or after I started using music in the openers, but it was when I was still making opening videos. And so most people are familiar with the story, but I'm going to go over briefly the details here. This was the girl's name was Michelle Carter, and her boyfriend was suicidal. And there were weeks and weeks of text messages back and forth between the two of them in which he disclosed all kinds of mental health experiences, depression, anxiety, fear, you name it. And he was dealing with it. And, back and forth he had talked about suicide. And she finally got fed up. Instead of talking to an adult and saying, hey, this is a serious issue, and going to get him some help, she really got fed up with him and started pushing him to do it. And ultimately he did. And the worst part of her behavior was he was texting with her during the suicide, because he committed suicide by parking his truck, running it, putting a hose from the tailpipe into the which a lot of people think that that's going to be painless, but it's not. Just having personally experienced oxygen deprivation from anaphylactic shock and severe asthma attacks, it's not painless, and it's not. It scares the shit out of you. It's terrifying to go through. Even when you're not suffocating because you can't breathe, it's still terrifying to have oxygen cut off from your brain. So, and then the other thing is with exhaust like that, he had to have been in a high temperature environment. So he was not just scared because he knew what he was doing. He had to also have been scared because he was experiencing the actual symptoms of oxygen deprivation, and he was probably overheated significantly. It's a very uncomfortable death. And this, at one point, he got out of the truck and told her he couldn't go through with it. He was scared, and she ordered him to get back in. So this wasn't just a simple set of communications where she sympathized with his reasons, or, I understand and didn't understand what was happening, but, understanding how he felt and blah, blah. No, it wasn't like that. This chick ruthlessly pressured this young man until he went through with the suicide that she thought he wanted, and that was it. He was gone. And then she got worried about it. Like, she knew she had done something wrong, and you could tell because she started talking with other people as if she didn't know what happened when she actually did. I don't think she realized his text messages were going to get examined.
Idiot.
Right.
What an idiot.
So her defense in court was that she was also depressed, in that her medication that she was on, Celexa, targets the brain's frontal lobe, controls decision-making and empathy, and that she had a similar personal struggle going on. Didn't argue necessarily that she wasn't responsible for what he did because it was all his decision. He argued that she wasn't responsible for what she did because she was drugged. Right? Like that was the main. Even the attorney for the defense did not make the argument this paper is about to make, that we're going to look at here. Right? So the obvious the obvious Bailey here is that just because she bullied him into suicide doesn't mean she's responsible for the suicide. The Bailey is the behavior she actually engaged in, telling him to commit suicide and making that the sort of their relationship in the moment of she was the almost like the dominatrix in that moment, guiding him through it. So the research paper we're looking at is titled Death by Text, Morality, Manipulation, and Murder in the Michelle Carter Case. And I'm not sure the way this is got a volume number but not a date on it. But it's from this year. So it has to have been, if not this past month, it has to have been January or February. So it's a fairly new article written about this, right? And this is by Emily D. Riles, College of Liberal Arts. This is from Polytechnic University, so you know it's going to be something, piece of work, from California. And we'll look first at the abstract, because I think you guys can spot the difference between the Motte and the Bailey just from this, right? According to news reports in 2014, through text messages, Michelle Carter directed Conrad Roy to die by suicide. Finding Michelle guilty of the involuntary manslaughter, the judge said she had a duty to call the police. The mediated narrative of the Carter case. So they're now, she's now already referring to the facts of the case as a mediated narrative. Right? Like, this literally happened. The text messages are right there in black and white. You can read them. We really aren't, if I don't have to, I'm not going to subject you guys to that. But they're there. And if you want to see them, in the low bar of this video, you can find a link to the article we were just looking at. And in that article, it has some of the text messages listed. And it also has a link to the whole set of text messages that was entered into evidence in the case, so you can actually read it for yourself. They went down a rabbit hole. Like, at the beginning of the rabbit hole was I feel crappy, and at the end of the rabbit hole was her telling him to die. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for my sanity, I'm gonna need to stay away from that.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, it just hurt to read, you know, especially his side of it, because you just saw, and from the perspective of someone who has been in that sort of dark cave, you get stuck, you get tunnel vision when you're suicidal.
Yeah.
And, like, everything that could help you is on the outside of the tunnel, and everything that could hurt you is to the back, to the direction you're facing away from in the tunnel. And it leaves suicide feeling like it's the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's really not. It's absolutely not. But it really, at that time, feels like none of the other options are real. And if you don't have someone in your court to save you, or you don't have something in your life that breaks through those walls, like for me it was, at the last minute, I got this mental image of my parents finding my body, and I couldn't do it because I knew what would happen, the pain that they would go through, and I couldn't inflict that pain on them. So then I had to start thinking about what else can I do in this situation, because it was situational and not just a chemical imbalance. And, you know, like, I didn't necessarily pick the best solution. But I didn't kill myself. So, obviously, because I'm here talking to you guys, and I don't think I'm a ghost. Yeah, it is possible that I died in the summer of 1985, and you know, this is all purgatory, but I don't think so.
Well, that was the best decision, you know.
That part
really
was a
was.
good decision. Just what I did
Yes.
afterwards was not a good decision. There was another
Yeah.
decision I could have made that was better. We'll just
Yeah.
leave it at that. Although it did work, it did put a stop to the situation. But in this instance, this is a girl who's listening to a guy go down that path from depression to despondence to suicidality. And instead of, you know, talking about help or talking to someone who could help and figuring out ways to lift him up and out of that situation and lift herself up and out of that situation, she went down the path with him and, like holding his hand the whole time and encouraged every wrong way of thinking that strengthens the walls of that tunnel. And of course, again, we know the result. So this abstract, the mediated narrative, like that's a bullshit one right there. Right? The mediated narrative of the Carter case criminalizes girls' virtual communication by insisting Conrad was driven to suicide by the machinations of a selfish and calculating girl. This article considers the stakes of Michelle's mediated construction for how we account for white teenage femininity, adult concerns about young people's communication and mental health in the midst of technology. So what's she saying there? Right at the beginning, the mediated narrative, we covered that, criminalizes girls' virtual communication. Right? There's the Motte. No, it's not. It wasn't about what she said to him and what impact that had and what her intentions were in saying that to him. It's not about the way that she carefully guided him through the process and coached him and pushed him to do it. No, it's because text messages were the vehicle. So you imagine you have an adult an adult woman goes and finds herself a teenage boy, right? But she's in, I don't know, Wisconsin, and he's in Louisiana. So she drives down to Louisiana in her little hatchback and picks him up and then drives him back to Wisconsin. Right? She gets arrested for transporting a minor across state lines of several states for illicit purposes. And some dipshit creates a research paper about the state's objection to women drivers. And it's totally about the fact that she drives a hatchback, guys. It has nothing to do with what she was going to do to that boy.
Jesus.
Like, it's obviously ridiculous when you talk about it like that, right?
Yeah.
But this person expected to be taken seriously, pretending the problem was that the state felt that she shouldn't have texted him. She goes on, I placed the Carter story with a long history of efforts within news media to demonize teen girls for not enacting proper femininity. Right? There's another, we have a couple of Motts here. Right? First is it was about the texts. It was because the vehicle for her abuse was text messages. Right? And then we have, it was the vehicle was that she was unfeminine. It wasn't about the fact that she was directly encouraging him to commit suicide. It was because it's unfeminine. She wasn't nurturing enough. She didn't take care of him. Yeah. I argue. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say so. Women are not responsible enough to own cell phones. Is that what we're getting from this? Is that what we're meant to take away?
If
God.
if a woman, if you can just deflect to the vehicle for the woman's abusive behavior, the abuse doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh
It's
God.
I wasn't mean or bad. I didn't shoot him. You just have something against baseball bats.
Yeah. Crying out loud.
And then the writer says, I argue that framing Michelle as lacking normative feminine caretaking skills and situating text messages as a murder weapon contributes to cultural anxiety concerning girls' connection with communication technologies. So what's she telling you there? I am going to ignore the behavior that she engaged in, and I'm going to talk only about the feminist concept of gender roles,
Yep.
the feminist concept of gender roles, and the method of communication she used for the emotional abuse that she engaged in. Like, and we buy this shit. People buy this shit. People accept, oh, yeah, this is obviously the problem wasn't that she told him to kill himself. It was that she used a text message from a phone to do it.
Yeah, she didn't use a carrier pigeon. Like, what the hell?
She wasn't right there whispering in his ear, putting the hose in the truck. She just put so much social pressure on him that he did it, that he went through and did it. Right? Like, this is when I saw this, when I initially saw this, all I could see was this abstract, and I was just like, we have to get the rest of this because holy fuck. So it goes on. Were you going to speak again?
No,
Oh, okay.
I'm just taken aback.
Yeah, it is upsetting.
Yeah.
In June 2014, 18-year-old Conrad Roy died from carbon monoxide poisoning in a pickup truck outside Kmart in Fairhaven, Massachusetts. According to, this story is so old that Kmart wasn't bankrupt yet.
Wow.
According to news reports, using manipulative text messages, Conrad's girlfriend, Michelle Carter, convinced him to end his life. There she had to admit what happened there. She convinced him to end his life. As Conrad attempted to delay his plans, Michelle's texts reportedly, and this is where we're getting into weasel words again, reportedly became more aggressively insistent. All right. You can see the text messages. She went from, just discussing it with him to, I don't believe you. You keep saying you're going to do it. Why haven't you done it yet? And it's quoted here. You keep pushing it off and you say you'll do it, but you never do. It's always going to be that way if you don't take action. Right? Not, maybe it's not what you really want. Maybe we should think about something else. Maybe you should talk to your family about this. Maybe you should talk to someone at school about this. Maybe you can talk to my parents. There's a million things that she could have said. Let's try to have some fun and see if that helps you feel better. Anything but,
Just, why haven't you done it yet?
shit or get off
Like,
the pot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, and I'm sorry, I do not remember the outcome of this case. Did she get off or did
She got convicted. The judge did not buy her bullshit because the text messages were so aggressive like that, and it was so blatant that it was impossible for the judge to just excuse. And I think,
Well, good.
I don't remember whether she had a jury or not, but yeah, when you saw the text messages, I went through and read the text messages, which, like I said, it hurt to read, that from the perspective of this is what this guy went through at the end of his life.
Yeah.
And it just, it makes you angry. It's hard to explain, but you see that from the perspective of someone who broke out of that tunnel, and it's just like it's like watching somebody cut off somebody's legs,
Yeah.
and then hearing some other people say, "Well, this individual wanted to be handicapped. It wasn't her fault. She grabbed a axe and cut his legs off. She knew that's what he wanted, right?"
Yeah.
So the after the quote, it goes on. Michelle's texts reportedly became more aggressively insistent. Michelle texted on the day Conrad died, "You keep pushing it off, and you'll do it. Say you do it, but you never do. It's always going to be that way if you don't take action." When Conrad reportedly got out of his idling vehicle because he was feeling scared, Michelle allegedly told him to get back in. Here she goes again, allegedly. All right. Now, this is being written after the conviction, okay?
Mm.
All right, so I'm going to go back to this article, all right? The day the article was published was in 2017. It was updated in 2017. So it was published before summer of 2017. And this gives you all of the information. We are in... Like, the actual incident happened in 2014, so this is 3 years after the incident, about the time it takes for the case to pan out. We're in 2025, all right? It's been almost 10 years since this article was last updated, much less published. So unless it took more than 10 years to get this, like, this was written and then didn't get published for more than 10 years, which... it was published this year, 2025, Women's Studies in Communications, Volume 48, number 155 to 72. Like, that information was clearly available.
Yeah.
She had at her fingertips the text message. There's no need for an allegedly anything. And the text message telling him to get back in the vehicle is in the group of text messages. It's right there in black and white. You can read it. When he reportedly got out of his idling vehicle because he was feeling scared, Michelle allegedly told him to get back in, as if these bits of evidence are in question.
In question, right.
This is how feminists lie to you. They don't... "Oh, no, this didn't happen. This never happened. Shit that never happened. .jpg," right? No, they insert phrases and words indicating that the evidence isn't real when it is clear and present.
Is that not gaslighting? Is that not also gaslighting? I would consider that gaslighting.
Yep. I would think so.
Jeez.
So...
People are evil.
Yeah. Before we get further, no, that's not even from... This is from a previous show. I'm not sure. I think these may have come through after HBR News. I better read them. So Meredith G gave us $5 and said HBR News... $4.96 is a zombie night. 3D printed knife of a shiv. These are... We were talking about weapons that are outlawed in the UK. It's kind of ironic, actually, given that, one of the rants I went on that night was there is no weapon that you can outlaw that will prevent people from engaging in violence against other people. And I want to remind you that the first time we talked about this case, when it was in the news before the conviction, before the hearing and everything, we talked about, if this is true, if the evidence that we were seeing come out in the news at the time was solid and proven to be real, that's proxy violence. She got him to do violence against himself. And we were talking about proxy violence in the episode that we discussed the case in. And she didn't need a knife or a gun or, any kind of blunt object. She just needed words.
Yeah.
Right? She just needed access to his mind. Oh, and or a shiv. Okay, not 3D printed knife or a shiv. Okay. Richard Beer gave us $5 and said, so yesterday in Texas there was an incident at a high school track championship meet that will likely be made into the American version of Adolescence by Netflix. Apparently one 17-year-old senior was stabbed by another 17-year-old senior who was getting a football scholarship offered from multiple colleges. The dispute apparently was over a seat in the stadium.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez, Pete's.
Yeah, it seems like the internet is just this is all that they're talking about now, because it was a black kid that killed a white student. And it's the race thing, right? They
Right.
they can point to race. And I was thinking about it as I was listening to different people talk about the situation today. And not only is it just a distraction from everything else that's going on politically, things that
Yeah.
affect everyone, right? But it's also just another example of male disposability, right? Because if it was a white on white crime, they wouldn't care. And it's just who cares? It's just a male child that's killed, whatever it happens, move on.
Yeah.
Same thing if it was just two black kids, right? But no, they because it is a black on white crime, they are using the race of these kids, and that is the main focus. It's like, no, can we just put down the race thing and focus on the fact that there's a child that lost his life? But
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
it's disappointing, to say the least. um
We
but
we
yeah,
might end up having to talk about that next week, because this is, there'll be more information out
yeah.
by then. And
Yeah.
but this looks like, was this a conflict over the scholarship or just over the seat?
No, it seems to have been just over the seat, right? So the and I hate, because I don't know the other kid's name. One of them is named, I forget both of their names at this point. But the white kid like picked up a book bag of the black kid, and
Mm.
basically it was like argument over a seat, right? Like, you can't sit here, and I'm gonna move your stuff. And so it doesn't seem plausible the way it's being described, because why would then the next reaction be to go and stab the other kid in the chest? It just doesn't make sense. There's details that aren't or that are missing
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
now. Um, but everyone is talking about it, and
What's
it's
really
it's sad.
what's really at heart there, then you end up, you have to question the environment at the school.
Hmm.
And that's, in the United States, one of the biggest problems is the school environment. It's actually not creating a space where students can just safely socialize with each other and learn and prepare themselves for adulthood. It's creating a huge area of conflict and other issues where the students aren't safe. And it's not just because they get into fights with each other, it's because the teachers are manipulating them psychologically and pulling all kinds of shit on them. The curriculum is bad. They're not getting taught what they should be getting taught, and they are getting indoctrinated with things that are not true, that they should not be getting indoctrinated with. And in the meantime, they're not being provided with any conflict management skills at all, which is
Yeah.
essential to transitioning from adolescence to adulthood, childhood to adolescence, and adolescence to adulthood. Like, those conflict managing skills make a huge difference in whether or not that you're employable, whether or not you go down a criminal path, right? Like this happened, but yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
I mean,
definitely have to look more into this maybe next week.
yeah, I mean, they're even going so far as to blame the fathers, specifically the fathers, right? Well, where's the fathers of these children, and why is it that it deserves a show. It definitely does.
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of ironic today also, when usually the people that are demanding to know where's the father, where's the father, are the same ones that push back against people who push for equally shared parenting rights following
Yep,
divorce, and
yep,
making it difficult to get a divorce, and encouraging girls to not have children outside of wedlock, and stay with their partner and raise the child with their partner instead.
yeah, exactly right.
So there you go. Which way do you want it? Do you want to complain about the dads when this kind of shit happens, or do you want to push back against people that want to make sure the dads have custody of the children and can actually provide the nurturing care they need in order to develop those conflict management skills?
Right.
So, interestingly, though, in this situation, I don't think I remember anybody asking where was her father, where was his father, in the Michelle Carter case, where she she talks Conrad Roy into suicide. This was this was all basically about, well, she's a girl, she's not guilty,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's pointed out here. Let's see, where were we? Michelle, who was 17 at the time of Conrad's death, was charged in February of 2015 with involuntary manslaughter. The district attorney argued that Michelle strongly influenced Conrad's decision to take his own life and encouraged him to die by suicide and guided him in his engagement of activities which led to his death. When the juvenile court judge pronounced Michelle guilty, he said she had a duty to call the police or Conrad's family, but instead listened on the phone as he died. So that was part of what he said. But there was a lot more, because he did describe in detail the set of behaviors, step by step, that she engaged in, one after another, of leading him down the path of suicide, pushing him to commit suicide, even mentioned the fact that she ordered him back into the truck after he got out. But all this individual puts in her paper, it's about the duty to call the police or Conrad's family. As if she just happened to stumble upon this situation and didn't take action to save him as a 17-year-old. Which, if that had been the case, there still could have been arguments for, why didn't you call somebody? Why didn't you do something? But it can be argued in that instance that, a 17-year-old might panic and not do the right thing because they're panicked. But then that does happen. Right? That happens in all kinds of emergencies with people. But this wasn't that kind of situation. She didn't just stumble across it. She was there for the whole thing. She knew the whole time that this was happening, and she was part of making it happen. Michelle began her prison sentence in February 2019. She was released early for good behavior in January 2020, so she served just under a year and is currently serving 5 years on probation, and accusing Michelle of encouraging Conrad to die by suicide, not following through on her, quote, duty to call the police, and, quote, causing Conrad's death. And she did put that in scare quotes. The legal system framed Michelle as responsible, again, in scare quotes, right? When a woman does something, responsible gets scare quotes around it, guys. Right? for Conrad's death. Engaging state forces in this way situates this entire case as operating within the carceral state. The very fact that Michelle served time suggests this case must be processed through the mechanisms of the legal system. Like, what's she saying there? When you think about this? So we go back to in accusing Michelle of encouraging Conrad to die by suicide, right? Accusing Michelle of encouraging Conrad to die by suicide. Would you say that saying to him after months and months of encouraging statements of if this is what you want to do, it's what you should do, and so on, you keep pushing it off and you say you'll do it, but you never do. It's always going to be that way if you don't take action. Do you think that constitutes encouraging Conrad to die by suicide?
Yeah.
So do you think
Yeah.
accusing is an unfair way of describing that situation?
Of course not. Of course not.
Right.
I mean, Jesus Christ. This is a perfect example of why we say to young men, don't be vulnerable to women. Don't tell them how you feel. Don't get involved with them. I mean, don't get involved with them emotionally. You can't really stop some guys from doing that, but do not let your guard down around these women because they will take your weakness and use it against you.
Yeah. This is also why we say don't stick your dick in crazy, right?
Yeah.
And we don't
yeah.
know if these people, these two were sexually active or anything like that. But
They don't even need to have
yeah,
been.
there wasn't anything in the text messages that I saw that indicated it. But what I'm pointing out here is she was on a medication for mental health problems as well. One of the things that happens with if you have depression and anxiety disorders, a lot of times you're more comfortable around other people with the same disorders, but there's a feedback loop that happens with that.
Yes.
So if you're depressed and you're hanging out with somebody that's depressed, it's harder for you to make each other feel better than it is for you to make each other feel comfortable being unmotivated and wallowing in the depression instead of fighting it.
Yeah.
And it makes it harder to recover, right? So obviously it's a little bit of a misdirection there. Her in accusing Michelle of encouraging in quotes, right?
That's exactly what she did.
Again, this is how feminists lie to you, right? She put the actual reality of what happened. Michelle encouraged Conrad to die by suicide. She framed it as a false accusation. The thing that actually happened, that there is demonstrable evidence in black and white that everybody can see, this is real. She framed that as a false allegation. And then the duty to call police is not unique to women. All right, if let's say if my husband, who is the maintenance guy at our apartment complex, since the factory that he was working in closed due to COVID, but let's say he goes into somebody's apartment and he sees rock solid evidence that they've broken into neighboring apartments and stolen shit, right? He's got a duty to report. He especially if, like he sees them do it. He's got a duty to report. And if a guy is walking down the street and he sees somebody jimmying the lock to get into a window of somebody's home, and it's pretty obvious that individual does not live in that house. Like he knows the people that live there, and he knows that guy's not one of them. And then, so he knows the guy's going to burglarize the house, or at least that he's breaking into the house. You witness a crime, and you don't report it, you can be charged as an accessory to that crime. If you see your friend sell drugs to one of your other friends, and those drugs just happen to be illegal still, right? Maybe your friend sells a prescription medication that isn't his prescription or the other person's prescription, and hands over the pills for the money, and you see that happen. If the cops can prove that you saw it and did not tell them, you can be charged as an accessory. And that kind of criminal charge gets levied against men and women all the time to get them to testify against perpetrators of crimes that the police are having a hard time nailing. Right? So this is this idea that duty to report, duty to call the police is a uniquely feminine characteristic. Again, it's bullshit. And putting that duty, the word duty in quotes. Like, well, she's full of duty. And again, we see the active word here, causing Conrad's death, put into quotes. And again, when we're talking about a woman, responsible gets scare quotes. Right? Engaging state forces in this way situates the entire case as operating within the carceral state, and the very fact that Michelle served time suggests this case must be processed through the mechanisms of the legal system, meaning we now have to criticize the criminal justice system because it actually took action against this woman, this girl, for using emotional abuse as a weapon of attack against this guy. And I think this right here that I have highlighted is the crux. This is why she wrote this paper. If the state holds women accountable for causing suicide by using emotional abuse, women are in deep shit. Can you imagine? Right? Think of how many times it has made the news that a man committed suicide because of emotional abuse by his ex during a custody battle.
Yeah.
Right?
Too many to count.
The one that really comes to mind first is Thomas Ball. He self-immolated. He set himself on fire in front of the courthouse. His daughter has talked about that since, and it's heartbreaking to listen to her because, again, it's, there's no secret I was a daddy's girl growing up, right? My dad meant a lot to me, means a lot to me, even in death. And it's traumatic to lose your dad at all. It's traumatic to lose your mom. It's traumatic to lose any loved one. And to lose them to a trauma that they experienced, and to know that it was scary, painful, and that they had no escape from it is horrifying. And as an adult, it causes nightmares, right? This kid went through it when she was a kid. And I can't imagine, his end of it, like having your child taken away from you. Just not knowing if your kid was safe, not being able to do the nurturing that you need to do to make sure your kid has the tools that she needs to grow up and live life happily and effectively and be part of her community and all that. Like, everything that he went through as a parent in that situation is horrifying, right? And when we talked about that situation and we talked about the tool of abuse that browbeating and gaslighting and emotional battery, basically, was taking place in the court system. with his ex-wife trying to prevent him from spending time with his child and to bankrupt him and so on. Feminists talked about it like we were just mad about a guy having to take financial responsibility for his kid.
Christ.
And Macney, I think, was the other one, Chris Macney, who wrote this gut-wrenching letter when he committed suicide. And it just, again, it was blatantly obvious from his responses that his death was caused by emotional abuse perpetrated by his ex-wife and her family. And what happened? Feminists talked about it as a reverse, right? He was emotionally abusing them by killing himself and complaining about their behavior in his suicide letter.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. I mean, really, what's it going to take for the courts to really take parental alienation as seriously as the outcomes tend to be? Because I guarantee you, if it was women who were offing themselves because they didn't have access to their children, it would be a national emergency.
It's probably not going to happen until you get a turnover in the state to where instead of Democrats or Republicans, you get populists running the system.
Mm-hmm.
Because Democrats and Republicans both have framework that they put around these stories where they don't, instead of looking at the people involved in the case as fallible human beings with weaknesses and strengths and the potential for good intentions and bad intentions and value to their child and value as human beings within the community and so on, they have scripts. Both sides have the deadbeat dad script, right? The left has the sainted single mother script, and the right has the martyred single mother script. And so they're not going to recognize that parental alienation is emotional abuse of the child and the other parent. Yeah. They're gonna, even in cases where the mother is being alienated, because when you get to a point where a father has custody and he's got it to the point where he can get away with engaging in parental alienation. Most people are aware of how hard it is for a dad to get custody in the first place. So the assumption is that this must be a really bad mother. And in a lot of instances, that's correct. Once in a blue moon, the reality is, in some backwater system, the dad has a bunch of wealth coming from other family members or some other location, and the mom has very little wealth. Or there's family politics where the dad comes from a highly recognized family and the mom comes from a nobody family. But that's a rare situation, right? And it's becoming increasingly rare because of the feminist jurisprudence that judges are subjected to, where they have to, even if the dad is from a highly respected family in the community and the mom is from a family that most of the people in the family have gotten into trouble for something, they still have to favor her, right? So it's becoming more and more of a mostly the fathers are the ones getting alienated. It does occasionally happen to women, though. And it might be that it's going to be a case like that, particularly where the woman is young and Something about her makes the public more likely to sympathize with her and stuff like that. Then maybe they'll figure out the parental alienation is bad. But at this point, it's hard to expect that.
Yeah.
So this goes on. The Carter case received swift and significant media attention, largely because all communication between Carter and Roy was via text message and phone calls, which meant a conviction would be rooted solely in Michelle's virtual actions. And this is, she's citing research, La Palme 2018, page 1444. So this was in a book that she's read this. Now I want to point something out. The reason that the case received swift and significant media attention is this is the first time there's been a case where the suicide that has gotten blamed on online bullying was a boy who died at the behest of a female bully. Like in the past, there have been instances, and we've talked about this too. There have been instances where other boys have bullied a boy to death online through social media posts and stuff like that. And there's been instances where girls have bullied other girls to death through online social media posts and stuff. And then there was this horrific case out of Texas where the mother of a girl who the mother felt had been wronged by another girl bullied the girl she thought had wronged her daughter. She pretended to be a boy, and she flirted with her and built up a relationship, and then dumped her and bullied her, and it was really insidious. Just absolutely, like, this mother was absolutely evil, 100% evil, for what she did to this kid, and caused a suicide. And those were all hearings that we've talked about little bits here and there in the past on HBR Talk. But this one was unique at the time, in that there had not been a story of a girl bullying a boy to death by using social media posts or text messages or any other such thing. And it wasn't widely recognized yet that this kind of relational aggression, this kind of sustained relational aggression against somebody, could be at fault when the person ended up committing suicide, the target ended up committing suicide to escape the abuse, or because of the abuse for any other reason. So this claim, largely because all communication between Carter and Roy was via text message and phone calls. Well, no. What that contributed to was that people actually could see what happened, right? The evidence was there. That made the evidence public. But the case received significant media attention because, for once, the girl that bullied someone to death bullied a boy to death. So it was outstanding in that it was a traceable example of something that happens all the time in the family courts, right? And it in other circumstances, in school settings where it's just, kids interacting with each other, if a boy has that kind of circumstance going on where a girl is bullying him, either through things that she's said to him or things that she's doing to him, and he goes to the school administrators for help, they treat him like he's just being a wimp.
Mm-hmm.
So, details of this case were carried on evening news programs and podcasts, as well as national newspapers and magazines. The case was also the focus of 2019 HBO documentary I Love You Now Die, the Commonwealth versus Michelle Carter. And given the narrative treatment in Lifetime's Conrad and Michelle, If Words Could Kill, and Hulu's The Girl from Plainville. And again, these all are like 2018. So this is citing a 2018 book and a 2018. I'm thinking that that's a movie, and then The Girl from Plainville on Hulu is probably a series. That's 2022. So all three of these things that are cited in this paper came out after the article that we just looked at, that was last updated in 2017, that physically contains the text messages, has links to the text messages. The way that they're printed up at the link makes them a little harder to read than they are in the actual story. But physically speaking, like, it's not a good format. But so this writer that wrote this paper could not possibly have not known, right? She couldn't possibly have been ignorant of what was contained in those text messages.
Right.
So she's looking at this through the journalistic coverage. I explore the journalistic coverage of this case through an analysis of diverse sites, including television news programs and 43 articles from national and local newspapers and magazines.
Lightning has been detected near your location.
Well, thank you very much. Did you guys hear that?
I definitely did.
Lightning has been detected. Yeah. Great. I'm gonna unplug some things here. Like I got plenty of time to run this without a power cord. I just hope we don't get to hear the tornado siren. So last night there were tornadoes in Ohio all over the place. Not where I was though. And then we had a 15-minute tornado warning because there was one on the ground in the general area, but it didn't go through the neighborhood where I was or my home. So yeah, it's not a tornado. There have been some predictions of tornadoes, and it doesn't seem like, I'm not seeing flashes of light in here. So last night there was a shit ton of lightning. It was beautiful. It was actually, I was watching out the windows.
I love a good thunder lightning storm.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's you guys might end up hearing that kind of stuff from my phone tonight, but like, you know the drill. If it gets bad and there actually is a tornado, which there doesn't appear to be any indication that one is even remotely likely right now, I'll just go into my safe space with this laptop computer and continue live streaming as long as I've got Wi-Fi. So, but anyway. Let's see. The media coverage of this case participates in framing, quote, justice. And it puts justice in scare quotes. When a woman is in question, when it's a woman that's being held accountable, justice gets scare quotes. As something that can be achieved when only one person is held responsible, negating a wealth of other contextual factors that undoubtedly shape anyone's experience with suicidal ideation. So let's go here. All right. Dang it. I didn't mean to let go of that. Come on. Maybe it's not going to work because this is a PDF. There we go. All right. So this sentence. Just considering a little bit of context here. Again, he didn't commit suicide because his parents didn't know he was depressed. He didn't commit suicide because nobody talked to the school on his behalf. Right? He didn't commit suicide because he had a chemical imbalance. He committed suicide because she told him to get back in the truck after he got out and said, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And she says, this writer says, the media coverage of this case in which a girl literally browbeat a guy into going through with a suicide that he had been considering. Browbeat him into getting back into the truck. Browbeat him into re-engaging his method of suicide after he stopped and said he was scared. Participates in framing justice as something that can be achieved when only the person whose actions directly contributed to his death. Only the person whose actions directly contributed to motivating him to engage his method of suicide is held responsible. Right? Negating all of the factors that didn't detract from it. Negating what? The wind speed.
Yeah.
Like, sorry. Only the person who pulled the trigger on the gun. Negating all of the wealth of other details, like how far away the target was, the wind
Right.
speed, the make and model of the pistol, and whether or not his friends and family stopped him from going to the location where she shot him with her words.
All of those things make her not less culpable for what she actually did. That actually contributed to him doing what he ended up doing.
Yeah.
My God.
Like, these are all details that she knew about. And again, so, by the way, I don't know if y'all know suicide is a crime. You can get arrested for it. And then they give you a hearing in the court system, just like if you had tried to commit a robbery, except the outcome is usually a determination of whether you're enough of a danger to yourself that you have to be institutionalized for some period of time in order to help you reset your mentality and recover from whatever it is making you suicidal. And so it's not the same as, like, you're not going to go to jail for it. You're going to be locked up, but you're not going to go to jail. And they may not even do that. They may, instead of locking you up, order you to take medication or order you to go to therapy, put you in someone's custody, make you, put you under guardianship of somebody like your one of your parents or a sibling or somebody in your family that can look out for you and make sure that you don't kill yourself. And part of the reason for it being handled that way by the state is that the state doesn't have a shitload of different mechanisms for handling human behavior. And so in order to have a mechanism that allows the state to step in and protect a person from their own suicidality, they criminalized it. It's not the best way to handle it, but it is the way that the state knows how to do shit. It's one of the reasons I'm not big on government. And it's not all that different from what, if there was no state, if there was no government, and you had that situation and somebody stopped you and your family was aware of it, you probably would still experience a condition not unlike being under somebody's guardianship, So it would be kind of weird, again, for knowing that somebody is going to commit suicide, that they're in the process of committing suicide, knowing that this is happening, and doing nothing to, not only doing nothing to stop it, and not only failing to call somebody and say, hey, this is happening, please help, but actually actively encouraging, do it. Like, it'd be really weird for the state to treat that as an innocent act. Just so when you read this sentence, you have to read it from the perspective of, this woman is basically writing that ignoring a tragedy and a crime and a self-harm that are taking place, not, even if she hadn't said, hey, do it, but just even the fact of just ignoring it, it's okay because she's a woman, right? Women are allowed to do that.
Yeah.
If you don't let women do that, you're you're making them perform femininity because it's totally feminine to be held accountable for something like that. Men are never held accountable for anything like that.
Jesus.
Right? But the fact that she actually actively browbeat him into it. And this woman is, oh, well, other things contributed. Yeah, but they didn't browbeat him into it.
Yeah.
Right? You know, if she'd have called him a racial slur in the process, we wouldn't be having this discussion because it would be a hate crime.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, depending on the race, like if she could have, like I don't know, if he had like Polish ancestry and she called him a Polak, or you know, like that's when I can, you know, I have a slight bit of that, and so I have been called that. Or if she, you know, if he had Spanish ancestry and she used the racial slur for that, or anything like that, that's all it would have taken to make this. You know, oh, she did it because he's this race or that race. Therefore, she's guilty, right? Therefore, shame on her. But no, they don't do that because it was just she's female.
Yep.
Poor girl.
Yep.
Indeed, one of the issues central to the analysis, or this analysis, is that there are many different stories that might have been told. Right? And this is another way to, I'm going to highlight this. There are many different stories. It doesn't have to be the whole statement. Feminists do this thing. All right? My truth. Your truth and my truth. There are many different ways that this could be described. Many different points of view and perspectives. All right? And I've actually had people post that stupid image of the two people standing on opposite ends of a number on the ground. And from one person's perspective, it looks like a 6. And from the other person's perspective, it looks like a 9. Mm-hmm. And there's a very solid point someone made about that. And on a different computer in one of my folders, in one of my meme folders, I have it. But I don't think I have it on this computer. They wrote underneath a very salient point about that. Right? Both perspectives are not right when you look at that. Right? You got one person that sees a 6 and one person that sees a 9. Right? One person is right and the other person is wrong. Somebody drew a number intending for it to be specifically a 6 or specifically a 9. They drew one or the other. They did not intend for it to look like both. Right?
Yep.
And one of those people is looking at it from the correct position, from the correct angle, and what they see, they are seeing the picture accurately, and they know the fact that it is what it is. The other person is looking at it from an incorrect perspective, and they're wrong. It's not what they're seeing is wrong. They're not looking at it from, and it could be anything from, you know, if that's a number in the road, which way does the traffic flow on that road? Does it flow from the position that would see it as a 6 or a position that would see it as a 9? Because that's probably the correct perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is it perpendicular to the road? Is there a bunch of other numbers somewhere on the road? Is there a 4 that you can look at and say, well, from the perspective that shows the 4 accurately, this looks like a 9. Right? Then it's a 9. There are many different stories, but not all of them are necessarily true. Not all of them are necessarily relevant. Saltwater Taffy, you're just fucking awesome. I don't know the name of that character, but it looks like a 9 or a 6 on its side. Right. Yeah, and a lot of, because they can be confusing, a lot of people and entities will put a line underneath so that you know which number it is and it's not mistaken for the other, which is smart. But yeah, The point being, you can, just because there are two different ways of looking at something and it looks different from those two different perspectives, doesn't mean that there are two correct ways of looking at it. Sure, there can be many different stories, right? Lots of different things can be said about this case. There are lots of different ways of analyzing what could have been done to help this boy. Not all of them are valid, and none of them negate the fact that she browbeat him into getting back into the vehicle where he was killing himself.
Yeah.
Whether relying on news stories, she says, the court documents or the pair's text conversations the stories told are mediated. And that's another one. She's engaging in false framing here. Calling a story mediated does not negate the evidence presented. It's a way of saying there's evidence that could have been presented that would change how the evidence that was presented influences your opinion.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen so many quotation marks in an article before. Nothing is what it appears to be on the face of it, right? Not to this woman, according to her.
Yeah.
She's just scapegoating after scapegoat. It's quite amazing.
It really is. And when you think about it, right, there are some instances where you can say that, right? If you have a fight that takes place, some people at work have a conflict and they go out into the parking lot at the end of the conflict at some point and beat each other's asses, right? And let's say most people didn't see the actual fight, the actual physical assault that took place. They just saw that these two people have been at each other's throats for maybe weeks. They've been saying nasty things to each other, playing jokes on each other, going to the manager with problems that they should have been able to work out together, and blah, blah, blah. But everybody knows that on, last Friday, after work, there was a fight in the parking lot and the two exchanged blows. And so the majority of people's stories will be about things that were said, incidents that took place. This person went to the manager about that person's lunch stinking up the break room, stupid stuff like that. Somebody, somewhere, will have a story about who threw the first punch.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And what predicated that first punch? Did anybody lunge? What words were exchanged? Was there a threat made? Anything like that. And those are kind of the nitty-gritty in terms of who committed an assault and who was acting in self-defense, how egregious was the assault, how legitimate was the self-defense, and so on. And all of that information can contribute to how strictly the discipline is applied, whether the police are called, what the police will do when they get there, whether they cite both with disorderly conduct or whether they cite one person with assault and don't cite the other person for anything, and so on. But imagine in the case, instead of just everybody's words, you have a security video. And the security video physically shows both parties walking out of the building and every step-by-step thing that happens between them walking out of the building and them exchanging blows. Now, you don't have a narrative. You have solid physical evidence. None of the other stories matter. You know who threw the first punch. You know what level of aggression was taking place before the first punch. You know who was engaging in it. And any documented evidence prior to that can contribute to, maybe the reason that person A leaned forward and yelled at person B before person B punched was because person B had been engaging in harassment. But the way to handle it isn't confronting them in the parking lot, right? So you have those kinds of, there's a lot of situations in which those kinds of little bits of contributing evidence can, okay, well, maybe this person, instead of getting a jail sentence, is going to get ordered to take anger management. But they're still guilty of a crime if they hit first. Or they're still guilty of a crime if they made a threat. It makes a difference, too, in, does the video camera have audio? Because if it has audio, then you know what was said. And if the individual that hit first can rightly say, he said he was going to stab me, and reached for his pocket, and it's true, and I didn't know if he had a knife or not, and I backed away and punched him reflexively, and that's true, then you have a totally different outcome than if they were just yelling cuss words at each other and they were mad and then somebody escalated by hitting the other person. This situation, yeah, there were lots of contributing factors, but it's like that fight where they were exchanging words back and forth and somebody escalated by hitting the other person. She escalated by badgering him, by browbeating him. You keep saying you're going to do it, but you're not really going to do it. I'm getting tired of hearing you say you're going to do it when you aren't shitting. Get off the pot. Shit or get off the pot. Right?
Yeah.
So it's not just a mediated story. Right? It's a story where all the evidence that was available to police and the court system was published. We're well aware of all the different circumstances, all the different contributing circumstances, and none of them mitigate the fact that she browbeat him into suicide.
I'm really curious as to the point of this author even writing this article.
Well, this is considered a piece of research. And
research?
You're aware of the feminist advocacy research scam, right? So this is framing this news story and news stories like it as highlighting a problem. And the problem is that she's trying to frame as a real thing is that Michelle Carter's speech, her means of communication, was criminalized because she was a girl not properly performing femininity. This is the argument that she's making. That if she had not been female, that this kid's death would not have been attributed to her.
It's such bullshit, because if the genders were reversed, they'd be doing what they do every time a man does something online. It's men online are a problem and they're just misogynists and they've got to be dealt with.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yep. By the way, I stopped in the middle of reading the Super Chows. Meredith G also gave us one for this episode, and said, "Honey for the Badgers, thanks for the thought-provoking conversation." Hopefully it is, because this is so sneaky and insidious what we're looking at here. Something I want you guys to understand, right? How do we get to a point where USAID, the USAID system, is funding sterilizing men in Africa, and feminists expect you to think is a good thing, right? How do we get to a point where they're committing one of the actions that is inherently genocidal? They're sterilizing the men of an ethnic group in a nation in Africa. Right? Sterilizing as many as possible and researching how to get more of them to agree to be sterilized. How do we get to the point where that is expected to fly? where the logic for that is expected to fly. We get to it through this kind of weasel, it's not activism, but I don't know, manipulation, right, of the system. So they build this body of writing, academic writing, that they'll refer to as research and theory, even though it is all speculation and conjecture. They'll build this house of cards with articles like this, and the ones that the stories that it's citing, and the entertainment media that it's citing, and so on, where false framing is repeatedly used to gloss over the reality that they're talking about and replace it with their own narrative, until there's a body of work big enough to go to Congress or to go to a judge in a case and say, look, here's what the academic consensus says. And it's based on all of this work. And that determines how the state acts. That determines what the state decides is going to happen in the next case, and the next. So, for example, the adolescence series that we've been talking about, and people are noticing, like, everybody's aware that the adolescence series is a false frame. It's a replacement of real events with a false narrative.
Yeah.
People are aware of that. People are aware of how it's being abused. They're offended that it's being put into the school systems in the UK. People, not just in the UK, but in the United States, in Canada. I'm even seeing comments in other languages about what a ridiculous thing it is for the UK to be putting that in their school systems and using that as a tool to attack boys under the guise of training, right? And in a vacuum, something like that cannot be successful. But it's not in a vacuum. The curriculum that will be created from that will cite several other things that we've looked at in sort of a vacuum. There are articles, news articles, and blog posts, feminist blog posts, and academic blog posts going back from like the last couple years to almost 10 years ago, where they have used the word incel to describe communities of boys and men, and where they have demonized them for being upset or sad about being lonely, and for noticing that they are mistreated by women, noticing that women are rude to them, that they look down on them, that they make false assumptions about them just for being there. That, you know, for instance, if you're waiting for a bus, you can't sit on a bench with the other people if you're unattractive and male, and your style of clothing demonstrates that you're depressed, because all of a sudden you're suspect. You're not just some guy sitting on a bench, you're a creep, right? And when they talk about that stuff, and they talk about how women and girls will have these narratives about them in their heads, and they'll act on them without any evidence to show this guy is dangerous, this guy is mean, this guy is creepy, this guy is a threat to me in any way, shape, or form. Feminists get offended when they see those discussions, and they treat it as an attack on women. They call it misogynistic. It's really a boundary issue with feminists, where they are they want control of the way guys think, and they want to be able to engage in those abusive practices of demonizing somebody that has done nothing and has presented no evidence that they deserve to be demonized, just because he's male, without him objecting to that. You're not allowed to object to being abused if you're a guy, right? So all that whole body of writing and popular media and social media and so on, that's going to get used to contribute to that curriculum, and boys are going to be browbeaten with that, and it's going to be used to justify to the public and scare people's moms too, right? It's going to be there's already been some moms that have written some blog posts that it's just like, gosh, I feel sorry for their sons. But that's all going to be used to contribute to that. So those kids in the school system are not just going to be under attack by means of showing them a series and having them talk about it. Everything they see is going to be specifically framed in very academic terms, in very manipulative terms, in ways that are specifically designed to not just affect the way they think, but cut off their ability to rationally debate.
Yeah.
It's way more abusive and insidious than people are giving it credit for. It's bad. People are recognizing that it's bad, but they're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, right? This is a psyop. And British children are about to be subjected to a psyop that is intended to make boys hate themselves.
Sorry. Hold on.
You all right?
Yeah, no, this guy that parks on the other block has this car that the alarm just keeps going off. Needs to fix it, but he hasn't done it. So I didn't know
He
if it
might
was
be
coming
sitting on his
through.
car keys when he gets in the house.
No, it's like every time,
Gosh.
2 or 3 times a night, and I just fix your damn car, man.
Yeah, he might
Jeez.
have if the sensitivity is variable, he might have it set too high. We had a neighbor that had the Viper one this was back in the 90s, and it when you approached the vehicle, it was designed to intimidate, by way of making the thief know that the thief has been spotted, and it alerts the neighborhood, right? So when you get too close to it, it would say, "Protected by Viper, stand back."
Yeah.
And and it had a variable sensitivity, and he had the sensitivity set too high, too sensitive. And the neighbor's cat, he would come home from work, and he'd park his truck on the street, and the neighbor's cat had identified that after a certain point of cooling, the hood would be an incredibly comfortable place for it to sit because it would be still warm, but not burny hot. And so he'd go in the house and he'd just start to relax, like maybe 5 or 10 minutes, maybe less than that even. And then all of a sudden his truck would just start going ballistic. "Protected by Viper, stand back. Protected by Viper, stand back." And he'd come out and there's the cat sitting on the hood of the truck. There's
Oh
no
my
thief.
God.
Nope, just cat loaf. and so he would shoo the cat away, and it would settle down. And then, he'd go back in the house and sit down and "Protected by Viper, stand back." Go back out. There's the cat sitting on the hood of the truck again. And this would continue until it cooled off.
Oh God.
Killed his
It
battery
could,
eventually.
yeah. I mean, that's what I'm gonna say. It could very well be a cat or some kind of animal out there, but I think it's more likely that there's some
Yeah,
bad wiring
probably.
somewhere in that car. But it's annoying. So I'm sorry if that came through.
Well, you
That's
should hear
just
mine. It's like I bet. I know my neighbor streams. Is a video game streamer. Because he's done it with the curtains open, so you can see that he's streaming. And everything, and like usually when I see it is when I'm coming home from work, and I always just feel so bad because my vehicle is noisy, and
yeah.
I just need one fucking day off, and we can put a new muffler on, and it'll solve that problem. There's an exhaust issue, and part of it's the muffler, and it's somewhere in the exhaust. There's also a hole And it's like causing all kinds of problems that need fixed.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You gotta
know
have
how
that
that
vacuum,
goes.
you know. But in any case, yeah. So it's not an alarm. It's just
Yes.
the car sounds like it's gonna die. So hopefully it doesn't. I really need to be able to get to and from work. But in any case, yeah. So we think these narratives like this is an example of it's a the different cogs and wheels in a psyop. Each one has a little tooth on it. This is a tooth on a cog, or in a psyop. This individual, she may not even know she's doing it, but she's been influenced by her professors or her colleagues if she is a professor. And although she is a professor, I would say she probably knows.
Yeah.
But yeah, she goes on. Let's see. Whether relying on the news story, the court's documents, or the pair's text conversations, the stories told are mediated. We can never know what actually happened.
Oh God, come on. Just why are you lying, lady? Why are you lying? I mean, yes, that is a statement that can be made, right? You don't know exactly what was going through his head at the very last minute, if it was definitely something that she said. But the things that she said to him obviously weren't helpful.
Yeah.
Why can't you just leave it at that? Why can't that just be sufficient enough to be the actual factual case of the matter, right? No, it's you've got to try to find some way to make her not as it's society's fault, not hers. Like, are you kidding me?
She goes on. There are any number of accounts of this tragic situation. Actually, there aren't. Lots of people haven't come out and said different things about what happened because lots of people were not there for the text messages. Only the two of them and their phones. And the actual messages themselves are available, black and white. You can see what was said. You can read what was said. And she goes on from that, though. We may perhaps never know the true story of what occurred between between Michelle and Conrad, yet the story that condemned Michelle as a manipulative bully took on a life of its own. Like, I'm sorry, but telling somebody to commit suicide is a known means of bullying.
Yeah.
Telling somebody to kill themselves is like every social media outlet bans people who do that.
Yeah,
Or
I
at
was just
least
gonna say you can't do
suspends
that
them.
on YouTube.
Can't do it on X. Can't do it on
No.
Facebook. You can't get away
Nope.
with that on I don't know. Maybe you can on 4chan, but it's because on 4chan people don't take it seriously.
Yeah.
It's almost like a sneeze, right? Look, I posted a meme. Kill yourself. That's 4chan, but that's a totally different environment. But regular social media, no. Right. And Richard Bier asks if the girl claims that her phone was cloned. No, she didn't claim that her phone was cloned. She didn't claim that somebody else made the text messages. None of that. There was no excuse whatsoever. She owned up to that part. And the arguments that her attorney made were more about her state of mind and whether or not she was responsible for what she did. Not that she didn't do it, or that it wasn't bad, really. Let's see. Yeah. So she says the story took on a life of its own, heightening cultural anxieties about the relationship between feminine manipulation and communication technologies. So her claim here isn't that it, like, isn't just that, the text messages were what we were mad about, and the vehicle is more important than the abuse itself. She is now, let's highlight this. Right, she is now condemning the criticism of relational aggression. Right, you can't criticize relational aggression if the vehicle involves communication technology instead of doing it in person. So we've had a history in child rearing and the education system and how it handles situations of bullying and harassment. We've had a history of recognizing things as abuse, specific behaviors as abuse, including types of relational aggression that socially isolate someone. Nobody hang out with Susie. Susie's persona non gratis. Don't sit with her at lunch. Don't talk to her in class. If she drops her pencil, don't pick it up. That kind of thing. Bullying, right? If somebody tells on the organizer and the school administration becomes aware that there is an organized campaign of excluding Susie, that can get the girls in trouble, right? Telling Susie nasty things about herself, tearing down her self-image deliberately, again, if it's organized, or if a particular bully engages in a sustained campaign of it, can be punishable in school under zero tolerance policies. And that's, you don't even have to tell Susie to kill herself. You can just consistently make fun of Susie for being fat, right? Or consistently make fun of Susie for having parents of two different races, or having parents that don't speak English. Anything that Susie might have a rough time processing or dealing with, or find embarrassing, or might make the other students mistreat Susie. Like, as soon as it's confirmed to the administration that a student has engaged in a sustained campaign of doing this to Susie, that student can get into trouble, right? And yeah, if another student kept approaching Susie and saying, "Have you killed yourself yet? Are you going to kill yourself?" Like, that would be considered bullying and harassment, and there would be discipline. There probably would be a suspension, and there probably would be a requirement of some kind of therapy before that student was allowed to return to the campus, because they would be considered dangerous to Susie and to the other students, right? But because it's done by text messages and online, suddenly this argument says it no longer counts as bullying, guys, because there was a different vehicle. We didn't cross state lines in a pickup truck. We crossed state lines in a Yugo, so it's okay.
Yeah, it's Verizon's fault, because that's who her phone carrier was. they were the one that transmitted those messages. They're as much to blame.
Yeah, AT&T.
Yep.
The art of triggering and being triggered. Like, the logic here is astounding. It really is astounding. That this is, it's bad enough that she's making this Motte Bailey argument, like, defending abuse. All right, defending browbeating somebody into suicide by hiding it behind the Motte of, it's about the style, the method of communication. It's not about what she said. It's about what she used. It's because she was speaking in text messages. Be like if you said, well, it's okay to commit perjury as long as you do it in Spanish instead of English.
Yeah.
There's no doubt Conrad's death is a tragedy. At least she admits that. That fact is not up for debate. My goal in this article is to examine, and this is the big point here. My goal is to examine the construction of Michelle's story as it unfolded in the media and the stakes of that concept for how we account for interpretations of femininity. Adult concerns about young people's communication and mental health in the midst of technology. So, what she's telling you there, like reading between the lines, is I don't want to admit that a girl about to reach adulthood insidiously, viciously, maliciously browbeat a young man who had just reached adulthood into killing himself. Therefore, I'm going to shift the focus from her agency and her accountability for her actions that she decided to take to extenuating circumstances and condemn you for judging.
Yeah.
So with that, we'll explore a little bit more of this next week, I think, before we get into the other story. I'm not going to read the entire paper, partly because it's behind a paywall. What I have isn't obviously behind a paywall, but I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But you get the gist just from that intro. You get the gist of what's going on here. And there's not the point that I wanted to make with it. We've pretty much made. Oh, somebody asked me a question about pork. John Doe says, Hannah, are you actually allergic to pork, or are you allergic to the feed that they feed pigs that affects their biochemistry? So it's not that. I'm not allergic. Pigs don't sweat, so they have less of a mechanism for processing toxins when they build up in pork. So it's not quite a level of where you would get diagnosed with gout for this, but when you eat food that has that kind of level of toxins in it, your body has to process it too. And I've noticed over the last 10 years or so that I tend to have more chronic joint pain after I eat pork than I do normally. And there's other things that contribute too. And it tends to be stuff that your body would process a lot of what you've taken in out and send it out with the trash that your endocrine system sorts out and says, this isn't contributing to the building of any cells. This is just gonna, go out the poop chute. So it goes along with, like, I don't eat pork. I don't drink alcohol anymore. I've cut way down on sugar. I don't take a lot of over-the-counter medication. If I don't have a prescription for something where the doctor says, you really need to take this, or, like with my allergy pills, there are times where if I don't take my allergy pills, I can't see because my eyes are going to be swelled shut.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I take that, but I try not to make my endocrine system process anything it doesn't have to. Right, and that's why. So I'm not eating a lot of, but and there isn't some way that you can feed or process or package pork. Your body builds up its own toxins. Everything you eat has stuff that your body rejects, and theirs does too. So it's just a thing. I just don't. But and it's not even a morality thing. Like, I have nothing against eating pork. I think for most people, if you're not a mutant like me, and your body works the way it's supposed to, you can pretty much eat any of that stuff, and it shouldn't cause you any problems, right? It's not unhealthy to eat these things. It's not unhealthy to have a beer now and then. It's pretty normal, but I just have to do things a little differently. So that's just the way it is. Unless somebody can come along and go through and change my DNA completely, that's gonna be the rest of my life. So there's a lot of other things I really enjoy eating and drinking that it's not that big of a deal. There's nothing important about the stuff that I'm not eating and drinking. So it's not like, I didn't have to switch to a total puree diet or anything like that. It takes a lot of time to get used to the change and stuff. It's really an easy switch for me. It could have been a lot worse. Like getting the news that I got from my medical DNA test. It's not the best news I could have gotten, but it's really not the worst news I could have gotten. And there were a lot of things in that test where I had, I'm a carrier, but I don't have the pathological version. That news could have been so much worse. You guys have no idea. So I can't even really be upset about it, because it's like, it's almost like God went through my DNA and picked out, like, well, all right, she's going to lose the lottery on something here. Let's pick the easiest thing for her to deal with.
Yeah.
Seriously. But in any case, where was I? Like I said, we'll go a little bit into the next paragraph, maybe the next 2 paragraphs. I'm not where we'll see this headline: technology, youth, and morality. I don't know if we're going to pass that headline, if we're going to go all the way through. But we'll finish this next week, and then I'm going to find some sources about that Texas incident, because I think I think you're right, Lauren. I think we're going to see some narratives come out of that. And we're going to talk about that too. And then I also want to talk a little bit more about how this contributes to getting legislation passed, getting initiatives funded and stuff like that, where you see this stuff on the surface, or you see a news story and then you don't see all of this stuff happening in the background, but Congress gets approached, or the creators of your public school curriculum get approached, or church administrators that determine what their youth groups are going to talk about get approached. And the next thing you know, there's this narrative that there's an undercurrent that is putting pressure on the Overton window to move it to where it's acceptable for women to engage in this type of abuse. And I think that's kind of I'm seeing a pattern between this and things like the Adolescent series, which appears to have... I haven't actually watched the series. I've just been watching the different trailers that have come out, and it appears to have a similar narrative that it's all right for women and girls to browbeat a boy. It's not all right for him to get upset about it and react.
Yeah.
And if he complains, that's the same as saying that he's going to stab somebody.
Yeah. Is that a series? I thought it was a movie.
Yeah, there's like 4 episodes. So what it
Okay.
is they made a movie and they broke it into 4 episodes and called
4
it a
episodes.
series,
Okay.
But I'm seeing the behavior of the narrative construction, where they take an incident, let's say the work incident that I made up to talk about, made national headlines because something about it had, like, maybe one of the punches thrown killed somebody. And so it makes national headlines and people talked about it, and it's controversial and all that kind of thing. And it doesn't quite fit a narrative that the left wants to promote like a racial narrative or a gender narrative or something like that. So they make a movie about it or a series about it, or they put it into an episode of a series, like maybe a police show where the police are responding to such an incident. But they change the characters. Like maybe both of the characters, the real story, maybe both of the people involved were men, but they make one of the characters a woman in the show.
Yeah.
And they'll do that, and they'll use it to assert a belief as true based on this narrative, and they'll say the narrative is based on a true story, when in reality the detail they've changed is so significant to the story that it is no longer based on a true story. Like there is no true story of that incident that they described.
And I think a lot of times it doesn't matter if you say that it's based on a true story. People will take it for gospel.
Oh yeah. Oh, I've seen chicks get mad at a guy because he has something in common with a villain in a movie or a TV show. His voice sounds the same, or his eyebrows are the same, right?
Chicks are stupid.
Like this is a real problem for guys with bushy eyebrows. Like I have actually witnessed this in person. I don't like you because you look like Bluto. Like to one of the most gentle and kind men I know. It's just like, you have to be kidding me. What do you mean? What is wrong with you? Like, do you not see the personality of the individual that you're hanging out with? But yeah, just stupid shit like that, right? Yeah. So because people, women in particular, but people in general can be tricked like that, where they see maybe they didn't discuss the work fight news story, right? But they see the movie about it, and they forget instantly that the actual news story was about two men in a fight, and they remember the movie being about a man and a woman in a fight. And I watched this happen in real time with a Kyle Rittenhouse story, where there were narratives upon narratives upon narratives, news articles that said false things, references in multiple entertainment media and so on, that portrayed the news story as if it happened in an entirely different way than it happened in real life. And I had arguments with people about what this kid did, and what he didn't do, and what the people that attacked him did and what they didn't do, where they're describing the narrative that is being created by these falsehoods, these fictions, as if it's the reality. And they're shocked when I can link to video evidence and articles about the court case and like literal, physical, undeniable, you can see what really happened evidence that contradicts everything they're saying, because they so expected to be right without having to look anything up, that they just couldn't believe what was in front of their eyes. And so that's kind of what this is for, what this type of writing is for. They use a shitload of, they don't just do it once, right? They do it like a rainstorm. You get a couple of drops like this, and then you get more and more. There will probably be other pieces of academic work, writing, research papers, essays in particular, because you can write anything in an essay, right? And it's legit part of the essay. So, but it just all kinds of different things, and they'll cite this as if it's gospel because it's published, and it'll become the facts of the case, right? Well, it was just alleged that she said that and did that. No, there's the text messages. You can see them. They're real.
Right.
No, we don't know that. They were submitted in the case. She didn't deny they were real. She only made excuses for them. Oh, we don't know. See, this article says. And that's the arguments that you end up in, right? So we'll go on with more of this, though, next week, because it is after 9 o'clock, and I better get us into the after show. But we'll continue from this point. We'll read the last paragraph on this page and the first paragraph on the next page, and we'll look at some of the articles about the Texas case, and have more of this discussion next week, because this is something that I think it's vital to understanding to understand this in order to understand how we end up with things like the Violence Against Women Act, USAID's funding the sterilization of a race of men in some foreign country, right? And the school system deciding that it is okay to tolerate this type of behavior toward boys in the classroom, and in fact, engaging in it academically. So, I don't recall seeing any super chats. I think we got all of the super chows. Albatross gave us $5, but it didn't say anything underneath. So, Albatross, if you were trying to send text with your super chat, it did not come through. I'm not quite sure why. But in any case, thank you for the $5. And that is all of our various super chats and super chows. I hope nothing comes through afterwards. We have had some, several actually, times where I've closed down the show, and a minute or two after I quit everything, another super chow comes through. I think it's because of this the 30-second delay. So I'm going to say, this is the cutoff point. Don't send any more, because in a few seconds I'm going to shut down the show, and I won't get to read it. So thanks everybody for listening. Thanks Lauren for going through this with me. And thanks to everyone who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. And good night all. We will see you next Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah.